the headlamps just a foot away from the concrete wall. He paused there, listening to the rhythmic flick of the wipers. He took a deep breath and exhaled slowly. He looked back down the road. He'd obviously taken a wrong turn somewhere. He could retrace his steps, but that would take too long. He'd better try to find out where the hell he was. He got out of the Jeep, feeling heavy raindrops spatter on his head. It was a real tropical storm, all right, raining so hard that it hurt. He glanced at his watch, clicking the button to illuminate the digital dial. 6 minutes gone. Where the hell was he? He walked around the concrete barrier, and on the other side, along with the rain, he heard the sound of gurgling water. Could it be the ocean? Nedry hurried forward, his eyes adjusting to the darkness as he went. Dense jungle on all sides, raindrops slapping on the leaves. The gurgling sound became louder, drawing him forward, and then suddenly he came out of the foliage and felt his feet sink into soft earth and saw the dark currents of the river. The river? He was at the jungle river? Damn, he thought. At the river where? The river ran for miles through the island. He looked at his watch again. 7 minutes gone. "You have a problem, Dennis," he said aloud. As if in reply, there was the soft, hooting cry of an owl in the forest. Nedry hardly noticed. He was worrying about his plan. The plain fact was the time had run out. There wasn't a choice anymore. He had to abandon his original plan. All he could do was go back to the control room, restore the computer, and somehow try to contact Dodson so he could set up the drop at the East Dock for the following night. Nedry would have to scramble to make that work, but he thought he could pull it off. The computer automatically logged all calls, so after Nedry got through to Dodson, he'd have to go back into the computer and erase the record of the call. But one thing was sure. He couldn't stay out in the park any longer, or his absence would definitely be noticed. Nedry started back, heading toward the glow of the car's headlights. He was drenched and miserable. And then he heard the soft hooting cry once more, and this time he paused. That hadn't really sounded like an owl, and it seemed to be close by, in the jungle, somewhere off to his right. As he listened, he heard a crashing sound in the underbrush, then silence. He waited, and he heard it again. It sounded distinctly like something big moving slowly through the jungle toward him. Something big. Something near. A big dinosaur. Get out of here, were his only thoughts. Nedry began to run. He made a lot of noise as he ran, but even so, he could hear the animal crashing through the foliage behind him, and hooting. It was coming closer. Stumbling over the tree roots in the darkness, clawing his way past dripping branches, he saw the Jeep ahead, and the light shining around the vertical wall of the barrier made him feel a little better. In a moment, he'd be in the car, and then he'd get the hell out of here. He scrambled around the barrier, and then he froze. The animal was already there. But he wasn't close. The dinosaur stood 40 feet away, at the edge of the illumination from the headlamps. Nedry hadn't taken the tour, so he hadn't seen the different types of dinosaurs, but this one was definitely strange looking. The 10-foot-tall body was yellow with black spots, and along the head ran a pair of red, V-shaped crests. But still, the dinosaur didn't move, but again gave its soft, hooting cry. Nedry paused and waited to see if it would attack. It didn't. Perhaps the headlights from the Jeep frightened it, forcing it to keep its distance, like a fire. The dinosaur stared at him, and then snapped its head in a single, swift motion. Nedry felt something smack wetly against his chest. He looked down and saw a dripping glob of foam on his rain-soaked shirt. He touched it curiously, still not comprehending. But then it clicked. It was spit. The dinosaur had spit on him. It was creepy, he thought. He looked back at the dinosaur, and he saw the head snap again, and immediately felt another wet smack against his neck, just above the shirt collar. He wiped it away with his hand. Jesus, it was disgusting, he thought. but the skin of his neck was already starting to tingle and burn. And he realized his hand was tingling too. It was almost as if he had been touched with acid. Nedry opened the car door, glancing back at the dinosaur to make sure it wasn't going to attack. And he felt a sudden, excruciating pain in his eyes, stabbing like spikes into the back of his skull. He squeezed his eyes shut and gasped with the intensity of it, and threw up his hands to cover his eyes and felt the slippery foam trickling down both sides of his nose. It was spit. The dinosaur had spit in his eyes. Even as he realized it, the pain overwhelmed him, and he dropped to his knees, disoriented and wheezing. Nedry collapsed onto his side, his cheek pressed to the wet ground. His breath came in thin whistles through the constant, ever-screaming pain that caused flashing spots of light to appear behind his tightly shut eyelids. The earth shook beneath him, and Nedry knew the dinosaur was moving. He could hear its soft, hooting cry, and despite the pain, he forced his eyes open. And still, he saw nothing but flashing spots against black. Slowly, the realization came to him. He was blind. The hooting had grown louder as Nedry scrambled to his feet and staggered back against the side panel of the car. A wave of nausea and dizziness swept over him. The dinosaur was close now. He could feel it coming close, and he was dimly aware of its snorting breath. But he couldn't see it. He couldn't see anything, and his terror was extreme. He stretched out his hands, waving them wildly in the air to ward off the attack that he knew was coming. And then there was a new, searing pain, like a fiery knife in his belly, and Nedry stumbled, reaching blindly down to touch the ragged edge of his shirt. And then a thick, slippery mass that was surprisingly warm. And with horror, he suddenly knew he was holding his own intestines in his hands. The dinosaur had torn him open. His guts had fallen out. Nedry fell to the ground and landed on something scaly and cold. It was the animal's foot. And then there was new pain on both sides of his head. The pain grew worse, and as he was lifted to his feet, he knew the dinosaur had his head in its jaws. And the horror of that realization was followed by a final wish that it would all be ended soon.